So this video is going to be about using slabs to push out with. So I've got two different thicknesses slabs here. I've got quarter inch slab here and a 1/8 slab inch here. And depending on how much you want to push out, you'll use a different thickness. So if I'm just maybe making a shape, so say I wanted to make a fin of it. This is something a student used this for. They used it to make a fin of a whale. And so they would, they took two pieces that were the same, like this, and they started to push it out, just with a rib, and pushing it against their hand at first, and then we can pull out some foam from the studio, and you can use foam in there as well to kind of have a shape that you're going for. It's a little bit hard with the pandemic, right, because we're trying not to use too many communal things and can't really clean foam very well. But foam works really well for this, or just cupping your hand. And so you can start to make a cupped, you can see it on the side view more, a cupped form that still has a real, like a planar quality. And so I'm using a thinner slab because I'm not pushing out too far. Because just like with throwing, right, when you push something out, it's actually thinning out the clay. So if you did this too much with a very thin slab, it would just bust through, unless you added some clay behind it, which you can also do, right? You can slip and score some clay behind there. So I've got the one side, and you would have cut out a second one. Let's see if this is big enough. It's close. We'll go with it. Again, like my other slab video, do as I say, not as I do. You should have this prepped ahead of time, the two of them. And the biggest thing you want to remember is, if you've got something that is not symmetrical, make sure that you're bowing it out in the right direction, right? So this one was like this, and I bowed it out this way. So I need to bow the other one the other way, or else when I put them together, they're not going to fit together. So I'm going to bow this out. Got a little bit of a crease there. It doesn't take long to get a little bit of a cup action, so depending on how deep or how puffy you want this to be, you will be doing this for more or less time. And again, if you're going to make it really, really deep, you'll need to use a thicker slab or add some clay into the thinnest areas by slipping and scoring. So once I have them flared out where I want them, I'm going to sort of test them together. And you can see that that makes this nice kind of puffy fin shape. And I'm going to need to attach these. So I could do a couple things. I could try to pinch them together. The clay is soft enough, it would probably be fine. But more likely, I'm going to want to slip and score these together. And I'm going to also kind of take care of these edges a little bit, because right now it's two edges just touching each other. So if I kind of carve those away a little bit, that will help them adhere. And they're going to squish, so it's not like I have to really take a ton of clay off here. I just want to give it a little bit of help. So we'll slip and score these together. Again, this clay is pretty soft, so I don't have to go nuts with this part of it. It'll squish pretty well. You know, we tell you a lot of rules in Ceramics 1. And one of those is that you always have to slip and score unless you're really working the clay together. But, it's, you know, it's not necessarily true. Everything has caveats. And some people will put clay together with just water and pressure and it holds. And it really just depends on what you're doing and the type of clay and how soft it is. So, just something to keep in mind. So I'm gonna put those together starting at the end so I know they'll meet up. And I'm gonna press those together. And you can see you're starting to get this kind of puffy shape that you could do with lots of different shapes. It can be pretty intricate as long as you're careful with how you're bowing them out. And then again, if I were to close off the end, I would then have trapped air, just like I did with the other slab demo we just did. And then I could kind of push against this. The air would help keep it from collapsing. Again, you could kind of blow into it through a small hole and puff it out even more as long as you let your seams firm up. And you could do a lot of different things with trapped air and kind of a puffy form. And then you could, once it's a little bit firmer, you can cut it up and use it as you need to. Okay, so that's a thin slab and just sort of a mild bump out. There are a lot of people that use slabs to build big sculptures, and they start with just a flat slab and they start to get your hand underneath it and start to really push it out. There's a lot of figure sculptors that start this way that will do like the chests and different things like that. There's a technique with if you've ever seen the ugly face jugs in Appalachia, those are thrown, but they do the same sort of thing. They reach inside the jug and push out from the inside to make a robust and rounded out three-dimensional form. And if your slab is thick enough, you can really push it. So say I was going to make a face on this, a head, I would start to push out and I would think about, okay, what kind of shape do I need for this? I've got a chin here and cheeks. Cheekbones would need to come out further. And as I feel the clay getting thinner, I can grab some extra clay and slip and score some clay in behind here so that I don't bust through. A lot of people do that for noses especially, or other kind of deep things that come out pretty far. So I'm starting to get a basic face here, get my forehead going. So noses, I'll definitely need some extra clay back there. So I'll want to kind of lift it up. And I'm going to start the nose first and then decide how much clay I need to add. But I can feel it getting really thin there, so I know I need to slip and score some clay in there. So I'm going to kind of score back there and score in some clay, water, and push that back into there so I can keep pushing the nose without it really ripping on me. And the beauty of clay, as we know, is that we can always add to it as long as you attach it properly, depending on the wetness or dryness of your clay. So you can always add some clay, and you can keep really pushing this and getting some very fine detail in sort of a soft way. And you can kind of go back and forth. You could use different tools to sharpen out your lines that you're creating. So I could grab my little soft nibbed tool here and start to shape out the lips. And you can really push and pull this pretty deeply and get a form out of this slab that you could then cut off and attach to something else, or maybe you're doing something that's like a relief type thing where you want it to be attached to a flat slab. So there's a lot of different ways that you could go about making this into a sculpture or a relief or a combination of those things. And you know, I could then add clay to the outside of this too. Like if I was going to do the eyes, I could start adding clay into these divots that I made and then working it in. I would obviously need to let this clay firm up before I pushed on it too much. I could also just get in here and push. Now that I know where the eyes are going to be, kind of push out a little more and go back and forth and start to find out what that's going to be. So that's another way of pushing out where you can get a lot of fine detail, and you know, pushing back from the outside. And again, much like anything else in ceramics, it's about timing, right? So there's certain things I could do with this process at this very soft stage, and there's other things that I can't do. So if I wanted to add some clay on the outside and then carve it back, I definitely have to wait for it to be drier. But let's see if I hold this the other way so you can see it a little better on the camera. So that's kind of where I was going with that. Obviously is not very detailed right now, but you can see the depth you can get, and you can push it further than this. You just need to keep adding more clay or use a thicker slab to do that. So another way to use slabs, or even to think about using your thrown pieces by using them to push out. Remember that the wheel is just a tool to facilitate your ideas. So you don't have to just make pots on the wheel. You certainly can. There's nothing wrong with making pots on the wheel. But you can use it to make components for sculptures. You can use it to make slabs. There's lots of people who will throw a big tall cylinder, cut it off its base, cut it open, and then you've got this slab that might move in a different way than if you rolled it out on the slab roller. So that is soft slab pushing out. just a kind of a few quick ways to get your ideas going with that stuff. And always remember, if you've got trapped air, you need to pop a hole in this before it gets too hard, or else it's going to bust the seams as it compresses and shrinks.